Good afternoon everyone. So guys, I've not done one of these videos for a couple of days, I think maybe 2-3 days, and there's been lots happening. I've just been really busy with stuff at home. So I'm going to try and fire through all the important things that are relevant, how I think a few of the things have changed and what it means to you guys, especially if you live in the UK, especially if you live on the coast. And that kind of doubles up if you live in America as well. So we're going to be talking about the nuclear threat to the UK and how I feel initially. I may have been wrong about the nuclear threat to the UK and how that's changed. We're going to be talking about the Russian advances in Ukraine, what that means, and could France enter Ukraine? By de facto, that would mean NATO. It's looking more likely every day that moves forwards now that the Ukrainian F16's will not be flown from Ukraine. Remember guys, okay, I said this months and months ago. I said they're not going to be flown, but now there's more stuff coming out that kind of confirms that. Excuse me. And we're going to be talking about the Russian war economy and how that's actually making Russia more powerful. So guys, excuse me, let's just get into it then. So over the last couple of days, in fighting in the east of Ukraine, the Russians are grinding on, they're pushing forwards. I've spoken to some people who are right on the front line in Ukraine. I can't repeat a lot of the stuff they said, but basically the Russians are pushing forwards. A lot of the weapons that were promised by the West, they just haven't got there. Now, they don't know why these weapons haven't got there. They don't know whether the guys at the front line, they don't know whether they're being held up in Kiev with bureaucracy. They don't know whether the Ukrainians don't want to push the weapons forwards because they know these towns are going to fall, or anything could happen, guys. But the reality is the weapons have not gotten to the front line yet. Now, looks like the Ukrainians have made a total withdrawal from in and around the area of Chavis Yar. I mentioned this a long time ago, guys. I said there's heavy fighting there. Chavis Yar, it's west of, Bakhmut. One thing that we can identify from this conflict is, guys, this is a conflict like none that we have ever seen in living memory. The Russians are going with a scorched earth tactic. What do I mean by that? Once they take somewhere, they're destroying it, they're setting fire to these buildings, they're making sure that there's nothing left behind that the Ukrainians could push back into and use as a fighting position, against them. So they really are just destroying everything in their wake now. Effective tactic? Yes. Brutal tactic? Yes. Guys, this is warfare. Whoever escalates to 10 quickest is usually the winner, so that's the reality of what's happening there. Now, excuse me. Remember what President Macron said, last month or maybe the month before, when he said, okay, French troops, and he was very clear about this. He said French troops will enter Ukraine, but he gave, I think, 3 caveats for that. First, he said the Russians need to make significant advances in the east. He said Zelensky needs to ask for assist. No, it was just 2. Yeah, it was just basically significant advances in the east, and he needs to be requested from Zelensky. So I feel right now, as I did back then, there's more of an argument now that the Russians are making significant advances. What does that mean? Is Zelensky gonna, have his last, his last grasp on power to send the French troops in, or will Le Pen kind of, be able to quash that? I don't know what's going to happen there, guys. Only time will tell. What is interesting, and I've said this for the longest time, this is why I've kind of stopped putting dates on things, because I feel everything right now is dependent on these F16's and when they're going to be flown, when these are going to be moving forwards, when they're going to start being able to conduct tactical strikes and be able to push the Russians, to stop the Russians having air superiority, and at least give the Ukrainian military, the infantry, a fighting chance. So, let me just read the Telegraph quickly, guys. Where are we? I think this one. I'll read it. In a brutal and terrifying 3 days, Russia has wreaked havoc on the tiny battered Ukrainian Air Force. lofting drones to surveil the Air Force's frontline airfields, then firing ballistic missiles to destroy hard-to-replace warplanes. As the missile campaign continues and the toll mounts, 4 or 5 aircraft were destroyed in 72 hours. It's increasingly clear just one thing that can save what's left of Ukrainian air power. More Western-made air defences, but they better arrive quickly. I'll put all these links in the description, guys. So, that's the situation. You've got, the Russians really digging down and trying to take out the Ukrainian airfields and try and take out the Ukrainian air capacity. Remember, these airfields need to be intact for these F16's to fly from. It's all well and good having, 30 F16's all nice and clean if they don't have a runway to fly from. So I feel as soon as these F16's move into country, the airfields would just be targeted. They don't need to target the aircraft. They can just take out, the Russians can just take out the airfields. So that's what I see, that's what I see happening. Remember, guys, right, I don't think these are ever going to be flown from Ukraine. I think Poland is going to be the key country where they're going to be flown from. If they are flown from Poland, that kind of means that Poland is entering the war, because then Poland becomes a target. Now, this is the reality of the, of the future we're moving into, and this is the conundrum. From the Russian side of it, the Russians don't have any other choice. The Russians, obviously, they're, guys, and people are saying, oh, Sean, are you pro, you're like a Russian, I'm not, guys. I'm being objective, and I'm telling you guys how it is. So, from the Russian side of it, they're looking at this conflict, and obviously they want to win. So they're looking at this and thinking, right, okay, if these F-16s start to fly, we're going to have to bring our glide munitions further out of range, so that's going to limit us. So the Russians are going to be proactive and take out these airfields. They know this. The Russians also know that if they do that, then the likelihood is that the Ukrainian F-16s will have to be flown from somewhere. The most likely place to me is Poland. And that would then give the Russians the question, do the Russians attack Poland? So guys, it really is a game of chess at the moment, and these boards are getting set ridiculously, and the stakes are very high indeed. So the Russian war economy, and guys, I don't want to dwell on this too much because I want to keep these videos short and sweet and get more information out to you. So the Russian economy has just been upgraded from upper middle to a high income country. Now guys, this is because of the sanctions that we imposed on Russia. Everything comes from energy. I don't care what anybody else says. Everything, if you boil it down, if you've got cheap energy, everything falls into place. Imagine how much more productive the UK economy would be if we had diesel at 70 pence a litre or something. Or if you're in the United States. I think I'm going off on a tangent, guys, okay? If the United States stopped oil exports, that would increase their productivity, and that would really get it for the next 5 years, and that would make them a huge powerhouse and ready for, they would be ready for another conflict. Because at the moment, I don't see the United States ready to fight, to potentially be drawn into a war with China, with Russia, with Iran, all over the place, guys. Because these are the places that look like they could erupt anytime, guys, alright? So basically, in a nutshell, with the Russian economy, our sanctions have upgraded their economy, and now Russia are a high-income country. I'll put the links into the description, guys, to this. So, there was an incident over the Black Sea. Remember when like a couple of days ago or whatever, I said there's an RAF surveillance plane, and it's gone out on a surveillance mission, and it had a 2 RAF jet escort. And we said this was strange because normally when these aircraft go up on surveillance missions, they're usually they usually go up on their own. Then we found out that back in 2022, quite soon after the 2022 invasion, a Russian aircraft fired a missile at one of these surveillance aircraft, and the missile was either aborted, some electronic countermeasures took it down, or whatever, we don't know. Equally, around this time I was talking about this, there was reports that are unconfirmed about a Global Hawk surveillance drone going down. So we don't know what's happened over the Black Sea. And the reality is, you know, we probably won't know until months, maybe even years, in a year's time. Excuse me. But as it stands, there was an RAF surveillance plane, you know, it went out doing a surveillance mission, and it had a 2-fighter escort. Now, these fighters had their transponders on. You know, the fighters, as we understand, and I'll put the links in the description, these 2 fighters went away and did something, and then, you know, some Russian aircraft came up to try and intercept the the surveillance plane, but there was 2 other, you know, there was 2 other RAF fighter jets in escort, and they kind of ambushed the Russians. You know, I don't know what it means. I'm not an RAF guy, sorry, I'm not an Air Force guy, but it shows you things are happening in the air in the Black Sea, and what you could have is, you know, an attack by accident. You know, one of these things could happen by accident, and when that happens, you see escalation. But don't worry, guys, we've got David Lammy as our Foreign Secretary. He'll be able to calm everything down. So, when this conflict started, I said quite early, you know, I said, look, I don't see a credible nuclear threat to the UK. Now, why I didn't see that, you know, even though Russia is, you know, they claim to be the world's leading superpower in nuclear weapons, you've got to understand, you know, that there's certain there's stuff in nuclear weapons that decays over time. One of the things that I'm really conscious of is tritium. If you've ever been in the military, you know what tritium is. It's the thing that makes your, you know, your night vision, your scopes and stuff, the graticules on your sighting systems. It makes them glow up at night, you know. But you also get tritium gas. Now, let me just quickly read about what tritium is, guys, just for you guys. So this is tritium, and you know, and the UK, believe it or not, is a huge producer. I think it's the world's leading producer of tritium gas. I think one of the main companies in Rotherham, of all places. But tritium is an important component in nuclear weapons. It's used to enhance the efficiency and the yield of fission bombs, and the fission stages of hydrogen bombs, also known as boosting, as well as external neutron initiators for such weapons. I'll put the link in the bio to this, guys. But basically, this tritium that's needed for nuclear weapons, it's got a 12-year half-life. So in 12 years, it's half as potent as it was. So it decays pretty quickly. Now, when you consider that each one of these nuclear weapons needs a certain amount of tritium, and that tritium needs to be constantly updated and it needs to be constantly given to it, it's kind of like saying, you know, I've got 6,000 DeWalt power drills, but I haven't got any batteries. You know, it's all right having having the so-called nuclear weapons, but if you haven't got the correct gases, fissionable material to make them work, you know, it doesn't really mean anything. Now, tritium itself is really expensive. It's $30,000 per gram. So when you look at all this in context, you kind of, you know, you've got to look at this and you've got to think, right, where's the credibility there of these nuclear weapons? And I just don't see it, guys, because of the, you know, because of this tritium gas, because of other things like, you know, the other fissionable materials that go in these nuclear weapons. But now we know that this is a real problem. I think what the Russians will be doing, and I've been reading and talking to some people, and I think the Poseidon missile system really does pose a credible threat to the UK, certainly, and coastal United States. So let me just read a little bit about the Poseidon nuclear system. Guys, imagine this. Imagine you've gone to the seaside, all right, in the UK, wherever you go. Like, if you're in up north, you've got, I don't know, Cleethorpes Beach. Imagine you're in Cleethorpes Beach, and all of a sudden, the water gets sucked out, and then you see a 500-meter tsunami coming towards you. But it's not just a tsunami, it's a radioactive tsunami. Guys, these things are terrifying. But I think these are where the Russians will be putting their, their capacity and their fissionable materials into these systems, because they are, the credible systems, and we don't really have an answer for them in the West. The Poseidon underwater drone, also known as Status 6 and in the United States as Canyon, is basically a very large nuclear-powered autonomous torpedo armed with a nuclear warhead. So basically, guys, these things are submarines. There's nobody in them, so they can stay under the water for a long time. They can move slowly on the bottom of the seabed, undetected, and get really close up to the shores. Now, I'm pretty convinced the Russians, with all their recent submarine activity, I think they're probing our defences, they're seeing how far they can get with their submarines before they're detected, with an eye to bringing some of these Poseidon nuclear submarines inland, and who knows, they could already be off the coast of the UK, off the coast of coastal United States. They could already be there just waiting for that satellite to go over and, transmit a signal to detonate. So that's where I think the real threat is, guys, at the moment. Guys, a lot of this has been my speculation, a lot of it's been my thoughts and my opinions. Tell me what you guys think in the comments, because I really do enjoy reading them, guys, and I've got a little bit more time now to answer them. So I'm going to mag to grid, and I'll see you guys later.